And now it's time for Atlanta's Business, an in-depth look at Atlanta commerce, hosted by Business Radio 1160 Vice President and General Manager, Jeff Davis. Today's guests are Ben Lichtenwallner and Ryan Sawyer of Biotrauma.
An elderly woman dies of natural causes in her residence located near Helen, Georgia. As the body was left unattended for several days prior to discovery, an intense odor problem affected the house. Additionally, a fair amount of body fluid seeped on and into the property, which had been disturbed by the deceased's felines. Most of us don't like to think about who cleans up this mess. We just figure it gets cleaned up. Somebody does it. We don't even think about it. But the two gentlemen who are with me today, Ryan Sawyer and Ben Lichtenwallner, actually are the ones or among the people who in our society take care of the damage that's caused by this kind of a problem. And not surprisingly, both of you are U.S. Marines and veterans of the Iraq War. And Ryan, I guess I'll ask you first how your experience in Iraq prepared you to start this company, Biotrauma, that does trauma and death scene decontamination.
Well, we got our start. I was originally motor transport, and our unit was tasked to do mortuary affairs. And that's where we pick up the fallen service members and also anybody else that passes away over in Iraq. We were slated to take care of that, get them off the battlefield, get them processed, and get them sent back to the United States. And that was kind of our introduction into the trauma scene.
Ben, how do you do something like that? You know, I mean, God bless you, but I always wondered who the people were who can. Does it take a certain type of individual to be able to do this kind of work?
Yeah, it does. One thing is that, us as Marines over there, we're becoming desensitized to seeing this all the time, obviously. In order to retrieve, recover and process personnel overseas, fallen servicemen, you have to, just like a doctor, you can't perform a surgery if you're emotionally attached. So you become desensitized to some degree. And really, that's kind of what we draw from. And just knowing the jobs out there, like a lot of families, we found out that the families were doing it themselves, so we kind of formed this company in response to that situation.
Must be tough on a family to do it themselves, aside from the fact, Ryan, that they really don't necessarily have the skills to do it and the experience to do it. Just emotionally, it's bad enough to lose a loved one, but then to have to clean up the vestiges of that death must be awful.
Right. Like Ben was saying, we found out a lot of the families were doing this themselves, or church members, groups from their church would come over and help them out with this problem, which it's good that there are nice people out there in the world that'll take care of this problem for somebody, but really everybody out there needs to know that this is covered by your homeowner's insurance policy, and nobody related to or knowing the person that died should have to do this themselves.
Do you get referrals from insurance companies, or does it usually come directly from the families?
On occasion, our customer is someone who cares about their property and has a need for it to be turned over. Obviously, if there's any kind of blood or body fluids in that property, it's a traumatic reminder to that family of whatever incident happened there previously. So that's our customer, but we go through several channels to reach that family, be it, kind of informal, not recommendations, but just getting on a list of service providers, say with a coroner or going through funeral homes or anybody else who interacts with that family around the time of death. That's who we're making known of our services to. You
have to step kind of gingerly in a situation like that, don't you? I mean,
yes.
That reminds me of a little bit. And excuse me for saying this, sometimes when you see a plane crash, a commercial airliner goes down, the next thing you know, within a couple of hours, the attorneys are contacting the families of the deceased, and it just seems so inappropriate and so premature for them to be, the bodies aren't cold yet, that kind of thing, before the body's cold. So I guess it must be a little bit of a difficult situation for you when you face this kind of thing.
It is. We, obviously, with government entities and all that stuff, they can't have some kind of a conflict of interest, so they can't recommend you specifically. And incidentally, those are the people responding first to the family's, incident. Aside from that, we try to talk to whoever might encounter them on scene. So it is tough to market, but that's why we're here today, partially just to kind of help get the word out. And we try to talk to everybody and let them know who we are and what it is that we do.
You know, we talked about the situation about the elderly woman who dies, and in your case, many times, I guess, when you talk about an elderly person, some of them are shut-ins, or they just don't have anybody living with them, and they can pass very quickly, and then several days have gone by before anybody knows that it's happened. Is this not unusual, Ryan?
Oh, it's very usual. This type of thing happens all the time. You know, most of the time when we talk about our business, people kind of throw up a wall and they're like, "Oh, homicide doesn't happen in my area, so y'all shouldn't be trying to market in this area." But really, it's natural death that we clean up the most, and it's peaceful death. It has nothing to do with homicide rates or anything like that. But it only takes 2 days to cause an odor and structural problem in someone's house, and it takes a professional service that has all the technologies to remediate that problem, to get rid of something like that.
Ben, what happens? I asked you this question off mic, but I want to ask you again. What is the process? What happens that causes there to be such damage after just a couple of days that your services would be needed?
The first thing you have is blood-borne pathogens. Obviously, there's a range of diseases that you could acquire from an exposure, Hep A all the way through G, HIV and AIDS. Hep B is something that lives outside of the body for 2 weeks. So typically, let's say you have a suicide or or just even a death in the home, a lot of times, if it's not a natural death where the body's been left undiscovered for 2 weeks, then you're well within that 2-week time frame, because the family, especially if they're still living in that house, wants somebody to clean it up the next day or that same day. So you're well within that risk period. Aside from bloodborne pathogens, basically the gravity, if there is an unattended death where blood and body fluids have left remains and have traveled through the structure of a property, gravity is pulling those downward. So if it's even if it's not on the second floor, if it's on the main floor, you're still going through the carpet, through the padding, through the support beams, and the subflooring and all that.
You mean from the second floor down to the first floor?
Yeah, but even if that's not the case, on the main floor, it's going to go all the way down to the foundation. Even if the spot of body fluids on the carpet is at surface level seemingly not that big, when you peel that back, you can actually see a huge radius of stain, much larger than what was on the surface, because all the blood and body fluids are entering one point of entry and then spreading out underneath. So you can't judge a book by its cover, so to speak.
Y'all ever worry about